Oh, there's so many yummy vegetarian options out there. You could try like lentil soup, veggie burgers, tofu stir fry. The possibilities are endless. Okay, so what do Alfred Hitchcock, detective stories, and ancient Greek paradoxes have in common? I know, it sounds like the setup to some super nerdy joke, right? But believe me, the answer unlocks a completely new way of seeing the world. It's because they are the keys to unlocking some of philosophy's most difficult ideas. Yeah, you heard me right. According to the philosopher Slavoj Žižek, all this pop culture stuff, it's not just mindless fun. It's actually a secret map. And if you learn how to read it, you don't just see movies differently, you start to understand the hidden rules driving your own desires, your anxieties, and, get this, reality itself. All right, so let's get into it. This is all about a strange way of seeing things. Zizek's whole method, he calls it looking awry. And look, this isn't about dumbing down big, complicated ideas with silly examples. No, it's the total opposite. He's saying that when you look at a complex theory through a Hitchcock film, you suddenly see things in both the theory and the film that you just couldn't see before. It's kind of like finding a secret decoder ring for all of culture. Okay, now we're going to talk about chasing an unreachable object. To really see how this looking awry thing works, let's tackle one of the biggest questions there is. What is desire? Like, what really makes us want the things we want? And to figure it out, we're not going to crack open some dusty psychology textbook. Nope. We're going to an ancient Greek paradox about a race between a hero and a tortoise. Seriously. But before we get to the race, there's one key term we gotta get our heads around. It's from Psychoanalysis, and it sounds a little weird. Objet petit a. I know, it sounds super academic, but trust me, you already know this feeling. It's not the actual thing you think you want. Like the job, the car, the perfect partner. It's that little gap inside you, that constant itch that makes you keep wanting stuff. It's the reason why, even when you get what you thought you wanted, you're still looking for the next thing. And this is where Zeno's paradox comes in. It's the perfect way to understand this chase. I mean, logically, we all know Achilles, the legendary warrior, is going to smoke that tortoise, right? But the paradox is set up in a clever way. See, he gives the tortoise a head start. He runs to where it was, but in that time, the tortoise has moved a tiny bit, so he runs to that new spot, and oops, the tortoise has moved again. The gap gets smaller and smaller, but he can never land on the exact spot the tortoise just left. That tortoise, that's the objet petit a. It's the target that's always just out of reach, the thing you can never quite grab. And the real point isn't to actually capture it, but to just keep closing that gap forever. So this brings up a huge question, right? If we never actually get the thing we're chasing, where's the fun in that? Where does the enjoyment come from? Well, the psychoanalyst Jacques Lacan had an answer. He said the real source of enjoyment is the repetitive movement of this closed circuit. In other words, the pleasure is in the chase itself. And this is a huge difference between what we call desire and something else, something Lacan called the drive. Think about the myth of Sisyphus. He's the perfect example of this. His goal, the thing he's supposedly trying to do, is get that giant rock to the top of the hill. But what's his real aim? What's the thing that defines his entire existence? It's the endless, looping process of pushing the rock. And you see this in your own life, right? That buzz you get when you start a new project, or the nervous excitement of a first date. The destination is one thing, but the real weird enjoyment, that comes from the loop of the process itself. The drive isn't about reaching the finish line. It just wants to keep on driving. Okay, so we're waking up into a dream now. This whole idea of a relentless, maybe even self-destructive drive, well, that's basically the entire engine of classic film noir. So we're going to leave the ancient myths behind and head to those shadowy, rain-slicked city streets to see how a film can completely mess with our ideas of reality and fantasy. So let's look at Fritz Lang's movie Woman in the Window. On the surface, the plot seems simple enough. You've got this quiet, respectable professor who dozes off and has this absolutely wild nightmare. He gets tangled up with a femme fatale, he ends up committing a murder, his whole life just spirals out of control. And then, bam! He wakes up, heart pounding, totally relieved that, phew, it was only a dream. But what if he's waking up to escape the truth of his dream? This is where that looking awry method just flips the whole thing on its head. Žižek asks this incredible question. Okay, the professor's happy to be back in his safe, boring reality. But what if the dream wasn't the lie? What if the dream was the moment the truth about his real desires came out, and waking up is actually him escaping back into his fantasy? And here's the quote that just nails it. Žižek says, "We have, on the contrary, a murderer dreaming in his everyday life that he is just a decent bourgeois professor." Think about that. We've got it completely backward. It's not a good guy dreaming he's a bad guy. It's a bad guy, or at least someone with these dark desires, who spends his whole life dreaming he's a normal, decent professor. The dream is the truth. His everyday life, that's the real fantasy. So let's break this down. Reality versus the real. The way we usually see it, right, is that our everyday life is solid and real, and dreams are just fluffy fantasies. But Žižek's view turns that upside down. He says our reality is actually this super fragile fantasy we all agree on, a story we build to protect ourselves from the messy, traumatic truth of what we really want. And that raw, chaotic truth, that's what psychoanalysis calls the real. All right, time for our last case study, When the Birds Attack. For this, we have to turn to the master himself, Alfred Hitchcock, to see what happens when that fragile story we call reality just gets shredded to pieces and something terrifying bursts through. In Hitchcock's masterpiece, The Birds, the really scary part isn't just the birds attacking. It's that we have no idea why. The attacks are totally random, they're senseless, there's no rhyme or reason. So the question that's been bugging everyone for decades is, why do the birds attack? Well, people have come up with a bunch of common interpretations over the years. You've got the cosmological one, where it's all about how chaotic the universe is. Then there's the ecological angle, nature getting revenge on humanity. And of course, the familial reading, where the birds are just a physical manifestation of all the drama happening in the family. And look, they're all pretty good takes. But Žižek's interpretation, it's way more specific and honestly, a lot more creepy. Here it is. Žižek's answer is pure psychoanalysis. The birds embody the terrifying maternal superego. Okay, I know that sounds like a bunch of jargon, so let's unpack it real quick. The normal superego you hear about in Freud is kind of like the voice of the father, the law. It's your conscience telling you what you can and can't do. But what happens when there is no strong father figure around? While in the family in the movie, the father is missing. So that symbolic law, the normal set of rules, is just gone. And that vacuum gets filled by this possessive, totally irrational maternal force. She's this power that's always working behind the scenes to block her son from having a normal relationship with any other woman. So, according to this reading, the bird attacks aren't just a metaphor for her rage. They literally are her rage. It's this terrifying, unspoken power just erupting into the real world because all the normal rules have broken down. So let's bring it all home. Your fantasy, your reality. After running through Greek paradoxes, film noir, and killer birds, what's the point of all this? Why does learning to look awry even matter in the first place? It really boils down to this one crucial idea. Fantasy is not an escape from our reality. It's the very thing that holds our reality together. That hidden, secret way we organize what we want, what gives us enjoyment, our personal fantasy, that's the actual structure that makes our day-to-day lives feel stable and make sense. So, to recap, what does the Žižekian lens really show us? First, that pop culture isn't just fluff. It's a map of what we all secretly want and fear. Second, it shows that we're driven by the chase, that we get a strange pleasure from that endless loop of wanting. Third, it reveals that our reality is basically a fragile story we build to protect ourselves from a harder truth. And finally, it's a warning. When the normal rules of society fail, something way more terrifying and arbitrary can rush in to take their place. And you gotta understand, this hidden logic isn't just for analyzing movies. It's playing out all around us. It's the invisible force that shapes our lives, our relationships, and yeah, even the totally weird and often irrational world of politics. So here's my challenge to you. The next time you watch your favorite movie or TV show, ask yourself, what hidden logic is running this story? Don't just ask what it's about. Ask, what's the impossible thing that everyone is chasing but can never get? What's the uncomfortable truth that this whole fictional reality is designed to hide? Give it a shot. Try looking at it awry. Because the hidden story you find, well, it might just tell you something about your own.